One of my followers just sent me this story that happened to them when they were 12 years old. They want to stay anonymous, but I'm going to speak for them. She calls this the Smiling Man. Her family moved into this Victorian-style home in Alabama around 1999. She said her childhood was perfect. She had friends, her brother had friends, her mom and dad had great jobs. She couldn't have asked for a better upbringing. But something started happening at nighttime that absolutely terrified her. In the early 2000s, sometime around Christmas, she started to experience something in her bedroom that to this day, she still can't explain. Let me paint a picture of what this house looks like. There are no bedrooms on the bottom floor. When you walk up the staircase, her parents' bedroom is on the other end of the hall. Her brother's bedroom is right beside her parents' room. There's a bathroom, a closet, and all that stuff, and her bedroom is all the way at the other end of the hall. So in her bedroom, she has 4 windows. 2 facing the street, the other 2 are facing the woods near her house. At the far left window, every other night, she started to see something that she calls the Smiling Man. She told me that she would wake up from a dream and glance over to that window, and as clear as day, she could see a man with his face pressed up against the window, smiling and looking directly at her. She was petrified. She would hide under the covers and immediately tell her parents in the morning what she saw. Parents didn't believe her, they chalked it up, said it was her imagination, but as time goes on, it was definitely not her imagination. Almost on a regular basis, there he was, with his face smushed up against that window, eyes beaming right towards her, looking at her, smiling with the most abnormal smile that you could imagine. Sometime mid-February, she had enough. It looked like this time that he was in her room. She ran down the hall, woke up her mom. She had enough. The mom comes down in the hallway with her into the bedroom, and her mom actually got a glimpse of what her daughter has been talking about. So her mom finally goes down and wakes up her dad. The dad is outside in a matter of minutes with a flashlight looking around everywhere. There's nothing on the ground, there's nothing on the trees, but he does shine his flashlight up to the roof near that window, and he sees footprints. The thing about it is there is no footprints leading off of the house. It just stops at her window. So now the dad is inside, looking through the closets, flipping every door, every light on, and again, nothing. As you would expect, the whole family is terrified now. They're out of the house, they're staying with in-laws, they're staying at hotel rooms, they're trying to get people over there to investigate and see what it is, and still, nothing. When they go back into the house, her bedroom is fine, but guess where he's at? He's at her brother's window. Though it's midsummer, they're out. The parents pack up, they leave, put the house for sale, and they're gone. There's not a lot of details that she gave me after that, but the one thing that she did say is terrifying. For the first time in a really long time, the mom brings the conversation up to her. The mom asks her, "When was the last time you saw the Smiling Man?" She replies that I haven't seen it since I lived in that house. So the mom looks directly at her daughter and says, "He's back. He's at my window." Her daughter cannot believe this. I mean, she is shocked. What do you mean he's back? The mom says, "He's visiting my window now, and he's smiling at me. And I don't think he's smiling because he's happy. I think he's smiling because he can actually see me." That is all the information I have about this story, and if anything comes of it, I'll let you know.
I have quite possibly the most terrifying story I've ever come across. I was actually up most of the night thinking about this, and I need to get it off my chest. It's quite meaty, and I'm gonna try and get everything in one video. This story is also true crime with a bit of paranormal, and the scariest thing isn't the paranormal, it's the men. A woman met this man on a dating app, and they were chatting for like 3 weeks, hitting it off, and they decided to go on a first date to the cinema. After the cinema, they decided to go get some food, and during this dinner, the guy that she meets, he's called Charles, really is keen on going on a second date. She really likes this guy. He's tall, dark, and handsome, everything she wants. He's really keen on taking her on a hike on a particular day, on a Sunday in 2 weeks' time. He already knows that she's into going on hikes because in her Tinder profile, she has photos of her on like group expeditions, and she's also put it in her bio that she's into it. So they make a plan in 2 weeks' time. He's going to come pick her up like crack of dawn, talking like 4:30 a.m. He's going to pick her up. They're going to go on the road and go on this hike. She says to her, "It's a surprise where we're going," and that should be red flag number 1. Week running up to the hike, she's saying like, "Can you tell me where we're going? Like, I need to know like what terrain to pack for." He keeps on saying, "It's a surprise. You're going to love it. I know you will. Like, trainers will be fine. Don't overthink about what to pack. It's not a hard hike." So eventually the evening of the night before rolls around and she sets her alarm like super early for 3 a.m. so she can make herself look really cute, pick out a cute hiking outfit because she does really like this guy. At night, she really doesn't sleep very well at all because she remembers having a really vivid and horrible nightmare. It was about the hike that she's going on, but she feels like she wasn't in her own body. And in it, she's being chased through the woods. And the reason why she doesn't think she was in her own body was because she was kind of looking at it in third person. And she remembers that the person that she was seeing was wearing pink fluorescent, like orangey fluorescent Nike trainers. This keeps her up most of the night and she decides just to get up early and she's scrolling on her Instagram and then she notices that Charles is currently active and maybe he sees that she's active and says like, if you're like good to go now, I can come pick you up. She says, yep, like I'm awake, let's do this. And when they're in the car, Charles really isn't speaking that much, but then she thinks, maybe it's because we're both tired, it is super early. So she tries to lighten the mood and says like, oh, can we stop and go and get coffee? And he's like, no, you don't need any of that. First of all, she doesn't like him saying that. And I wouldn't like a man saying that, to be fair. And then she's trying to like get information out of him about where they're going. And he doesn't say anything. And then randomly he turns around and says to her, oh, have you told anybody about what we're doing today? And she says no, quite nonchalantly, but then instantly regrets saying that. Because of all the true crime podcasts her and her friends speak about, they always say like, don't go to an unlocation and never go to a second location. Then she tries to think again, like, maybe I can try and stop the car. So she says, oh, I really need the bathroom. Like, can we pull over at a gas station so I can grab a drink and go get coffee? And he's like, honestly, it's quicker if we just go to this location. You can do a wild wee. Like, I'm not bothered. I don't want to do any detours. She's got this knot in her stomach that is just growing and growing and growing, thinking, I don't want to do this hike anymore. I'm getting this really bad feeling, this bad intuition that I shouldn't be here. It's about 4:45 at this time in the morning and she thinks like, I need to let people know where I am right now. So she doesn't want to text people because she thinks people will still be in bed. It's early on a Sunday morning. So she calls the one person that she will know would answer, and that was her sister-in-law. Her sister-in-law was a relatively new mum and she knew that she weren't sleeping. Like, girl, I know that feeling. So quite nonchalantly, she pulls her phone out, doesn't even tell Charles that she's calling someone, and she says, oh, hey, just to let you know that I'm out on a hike today, but we've got to go collect our dad's present. Can you do it? Because I won't be there to collect it today. So the sister-in-law's on the phone like, girl, like, are you out? Are you drunk? And she doesn't even kind of like answer the questions that her sister-in-law's asking. She just carries on this conversation that she's just made up. Like, oh yeah, dad's fishing rod's ready to be collected. I'm on a hike all day today, so I don't think I'll be home to go and get it. So then the sister-in-law asks her, like, are you okay? Like, do you need help? And this is when the woman says, I don't know the woman's name, by the way. I never have done. So let's just call her Sarah, how I name everyone. And Sarah replies, I think so. I don't know. I'm going to have to let you know when I've got internet connection what the collection number will be. Again, she's trying to not to make Charles seem suspicious. But she says to her sister-in-law on the phone, like, I'm on highway 609. Hopefully internet will come in soon. Like, speak later. Love you. She never ends the phone call with love you. So that means the sister-in-law knows that something's up. Charles looks furious and he says, like, who did you speak to? And she was like, oh, my sister-in-law. And he's like, do you usually speak to your sister-in-law at 5 a.m. in the morning? And he's being just so weird and suspicious that she's like, I don't like this guy. I don't want to do this walk. So she openly says to Charles, like, I don't think I want to do this today. I'm not feeling that great. I've got plans that I forgot about. Like, can we go home? And Charles is like, look, it's another like hour, 45-minute journey home now. We're 5 minutes away. Let's just try and see how the day goes. Then for a moment, he sounds quite sincere and quite upset. So she thinks, maybe I'm just thinking way too much into this. I really like this guy. Like, I've stalked his Instagram. I know his name. Like, we went on the first date together. Everything was great. I'm thinking too much into this. They eventually come off this highway. It's quite a busy road, and they end up on like a dirt track where she remembers him having to get out of a gate, to get out of the car to unlock a gate. They drove up to another gate where again he got out and unlocked it. This makes Sarah ask like, oh, do you work here? And he says, no, it's just an area of land that me and my buddy own together. Now, they drive up a little further and they come to a clearing where they've been felling some trees. So it's quite open, but there's big piles of logs and there's some like machinery and equipment that looks quite old. But by a massive pile of logs, she notices that there's another truck parked there. And she thinks like maybe that's just a vehicle that they leave here. But it looks exceptionally clean. So they get out the car and walk into the woodlands. Now, when they walk into the woodlands, they walk by this truck and this big pile of logs where there's also like tarp and some machinery. And she looks down on the floor and she sees this one item that makes her feel sick. She sees a pinky orange fluorescent woman's Nike trainer, the same shoes that she saw in her dream. She doesn't want to arouse any suspicion. She pulls out a phone, notices there is zero signal, zero Wi-Fi, and remembers all of the conversations that she's had with her friends and various podcast hosts saying if you have to go in another location and you feel trapped, you collect as much evidence as you possibly can. If you're in an altercation, you use your nails and your teeth as much as you can, so you can collect DNA. But also, if you have a device on you, you take as many pictures and videos as you possibly can, because if your device is retrieved, so can all of this digital evidence. Because she's got a phone out and there's no signal, she decides to take photos. And she's like, oh, let's take a photo while we look cute, while we're not sweaty. And Charles is like, yeah, no, I'm not into that. Let's wait until we go to this location. Which again makes her gut just completely twist. And she's like, I'm going to die on this trip. I'm going to die and I don't know what to do. He's always walking like 4 or 5 steps behind her, and she keeps on stopping to make him guide the way. And she's like, dude, this is your hike. Like, I don't know where we're going. And he's like, you know where we're going. Like, just follow your instinct. You go where we're going. Her instinct is to run away and go home. So she doesn't know what this guy's on about. Says they've only been on this like dirt track for probably about like 8, 9, 10 minutes. They haven't been walking very far whatsoever, but they are walking deeper and deeper into the woods. Then all of a sudden she hears this female voice like screeching, run. This causes her to turn around and look at Charles because she wants to know where this voice is going. But instead of looking at Charles, she looks straight past him and sees a man walking like very quickly with a backpack towards her and Charles. For a moment, she looks like a deer in headlights, which makes Charles turn around to see like what she's looking at, what scared her. And she says the moment Charles turns back to look at her, she knows that he knows that the gig is up. The look in his face told her everything she needed to know. She didn't bother asking any questions. She just ran. She ran in the direction she knew the highway was. Really sorry, I'm going to have to film a part 2. I've already filmed it. Go and watch it. This is quite possibly the worst second date from hell. And carrying on from my first video, Sarah is on a date with Charles and she realises her intuition is telling her that something bad's going to happen after a nightmare, after multiple red flags. And while she's out on a hike, she notices another man is joining them. All of the red flags that she's experienced, she doesn't bother asking any questions. She doesn't let this man come anywhere near her. She just turns and runs towards the highway. For the first 20 seconds, she says that Charles is saying like, hey, what are you doing? Is this a joke? And then very quickly, he turns aggressive. He starts swearing at her, saying like, you better come back here, like you're dead, basically. Like, what the fuck are you doing? You're embarrassing me, all this stuff. She doesn't stop once. She just keeps on running. She's running and running, and then she remembers the nightmare she had the night before. She's pretty much living her nightmare. She's being chased through the woods. She can hear the hum of the cars getting louder and louder, knowing that the highway is nearby, but she says that the terrain is getting like really dangerous. There's like fell trees everywhere. Like it's just a mess. You can't imagine running through your life with so many fallen trees. It's like an assault course. And she notices that she's actually running downhill and the highway is then uphill. And she knows that as soon as she starts going uphill, that's when she's vulnerable. And that's when this man is going to catch up with her and do God knows what to her. That's when she says that she hears this voice again saying, you need to hide. You need to hide. So she gets to this verge where pretty much if she goes uphill, she ends up at the highway. But at the bottom of this verge is just like litter, fallen trees, debris, just like brambles, just a mess. And she decides just to bury herself. She can hear this man, Charles, like running, like calling her name. He's making up like a lot of excuses. He's saying, if it's that other man, like I don't even know where, like who he is. Like, don't be scared. I understand if you're scared. Like, it's early in the morning. Let's just meet up. Like, I'm here to protect you, basically. She still decides not to even like move a muscle. She just wants to stay hidden. She says it sounds like he's basically on top of her at this point. Like, as soon as she pops her head up, they're going to find her. That's when her fears are confirmed, when she hears another male voice saying she might be on the highway by now. And that's when she hears Charles again say, that fucking bitch, I knew she knew something was up. Sarah says that she's laying in this ditch for what feels like forever. and she doesn't want to move. She's scared. She even says that she wets herself. That's how frightened she was. Eventually, she pulls up the courage to move and pulls her phone out of her pocket and calls 911 and just cries her eyes out to this operator and says, like, I need your help. I was chased through the woods. I don't know where I am. And the operator is still saying, like, don't move. We will bring people to you. They are, like, quite frankly in the middle of nowhere, but she is really close to this highway. And the operator's on the phone to her saying, like, can you hear the sirens? She can't hear anything. And eventually she says, I can hear the sirens. And she goes, okay, can you safely make your way up to the highway? She's really scared. At first she, like, looks around because she thinks these men are going to pop out of nowhere. She eventually feels like she's safe. She crawls up to the highway, and that's when she gets into the police officer's car. Nowhere near her hometown, so they take her to the nearest police station where they interview her, and she just tells them everything. She tells them about her intuition, that she knew something was bad. She tells them about the red flags, and she also said the thing that made her scared the most is when she saw a single lady's shoe. Because when do you ever lose one shoe out on a hike? Like, it's not normal. And that's what made the police really listen to her. And they said, like, can you give a description of the shoe? Can you give a description of exactly where you are? If we give you a map, can you point out, like, these gates that this guy had to get out and unlock? She did that. And also during the interview, they said to her, like, is your name Sarah O'Malley? I'm making that up. And she says, yeah. And she goes, okay, we've actually had a call from another police station that your sister-in-law is worried about you. So the call that she made to her sister was 100% worth it. And over the next week or so, the police were in touch with Sarah quite a lot, trying to get as much information out as possible. So Sarah eventually asked, like, is everything okay? Like, I thought I was going mad. I knew I was in danger, but you keep on asking me these questions. Is there something about this man? All the police say to her is the information that you've given us has been vital in a missing person case, with the description of the shoe that she saw matching one that belonged to a missing person. And that missing person was a Native American woman. In that area, missing Native women is quite hot, and the police and the media rarely talk about it or cover it. They also told her that they believe that Charles was an alias name, and all of the Instagram profiles and dating profiles were all fake and all deactivated. They also couldn't give her any more information about this other mystery man, but they knew he was probably an accomplice. And Sarah unfortunately never got, like, the full, like, ending that she wanted, like her finding out who this man was and him going to prison. It feels like telling her story is her way of releasing this trauma and just let other women know that always tell your friends where you're going and never really trust somebody, even if you feel like you do know them. She also says that she knew she had a guardian angel watching over her. The nightmare that she had, all of these red flags, her intuition. She says that somebody was helping her, and hearing that ghostly female voice, she's adamant, is this missing person? The story is kind of true crime with a paranormal crossover, and the scariest thing isn't the paranormal, it's the man, which honestly, we're just used to it now. First time I heard this story was on Spooked podcast. It's quite an old one. I'll try and link the story below if I remember the name, because last night I was just thinking about the story over and over again. So let me know your thoughts on it. It's truly a terrifying story. It's so scary.
Bosses from Hell story time. So I had just got hired by a husband and wife who own a cleaning company down in Myrtle Beach. My coworkers warned me, stay away from the husband, he's a creep, he tries to sleep with everybody, and they just kept saying, it's damn if you do, damn if you don't out here, but I didn't know what they meant. I found out he would sabotage anyone that wouldn't sleep with him, because that's what happened to me. That first day, they chose crews, who would go with the wife, who'd go with the husband, and he chose me to go with his crews. Throughout the day, he would follow me around in these condos when I'm cleaning, and I'm thinking, he doesn't stand over other people like this, maybe it's just because I'm new. Then he started with the, oh, you're really cute, you're one of the most beautiful women out here, you know, I take good care of my employees, especially the ones I'm close to. I said, look, the more I talk, the less I get done, and your wife's not going to be happy about that, so I need to get back to work. He said, oh, you're right, but then he come back 5 minutes later and start talking to me again. This man has followed me around from like 6, 7 different rooms all day. When we get to the last room, he gets close to my face like he's going to try to kiss me, and I said, whoa. I'm in a relationship and my old man's crazy as hell. He said he don't have to know. I said, you missed the part where I said he's crazy as hell? Like, he's pull up at your house type crazy. You don't want to mess with that. He said, my wife told me you were with so-and-so. I said, I don't know where she got that, but I'm with blank. And he's fucking nuts and very protective. He just kept talking about how this guy wasn't good enough for me and kept trying to push me into hanging out with him after work. I said, none of that matters. I'm in a relationship. We're not going to be together. I'm here to work and make money. That's it. He left but came back a few minutes later. I said, what are you doing back here? Why are you standing over only me while I'm working? You have all these other employees you ain't even checked on. I feel like I'm going to have to call your wife or file a complaint. This is harassment. That's when his whole demeanor changed and he said, oh, I'm not trying to hook up with you. I don't find you attractive at all. That's not what I meant. This is when he starts sabotaging me and tries to make my work day a lot harder. The next day, he picked me again to go on his crew. So I get the room cleaned and I call him in to inspect it. He's checking all these things that he never checked before. Behind washers and dryers, I said, why are you checking that? We're not getting paid to do a deep clean. He said, no, you're supposed to be doing a deep clean. I thought you knew that. I called his wife on the spot. I said, what am I getting paid for? A basic clean or a deep clean? She said, a basic clean. I said, so I'm not supposed to go behind washers and dryers? She said, no, that'd take all day. I go in the next room and find a newly melted ice cream wrapper with melted chocolate nuts everywhere. It was fresh. I knew it weren't the guests because they had been gone. It was him. Orange peelings, crushed up crackers, crushed up tater chips, melted chocolate, stuffed in the nightstands, the dresser drawers, everywhere. He's going room to room, making a mess, trying to make my job harder. He also went to every bathroom and blew the toilets up with diarrhea. The toilet was still running. It had to be somebody with a key, and him and his wife were the only ones with keys to those rooms. Like, this man literally took the time to crap in a toilet and try to with me, and I'm like, okay, this is war now, and I'm out for blood. When he came in to inspect that room, he walked to every single place where he left that trash. He said, you ain't cleaned up none of this? I said, no, and I'm not going to because you did it. And he didn't like that at all. So we go to lunch, and I tell a coworker what I've been finding in those rooms, and she said, oh, you must have rejected his advances. He's gonna make your day a living hell. I said, oh, he wants to play that game? Well, I'll show him what hell really is. I'll bring him face to face with the devil. Then he goes to my next room and sprays fart spray so much that I can't even go in there and work. Couldn't breathe. I'm gonna let y'all in on a little secret that I've never told anyone until now. I was told to make all reports to his wife, the boss lady, but instead I got the maintenance man's number from that room and I called them and reported a gas leak. So they clear out the whole building and call the police, the fire department, everybody, and that's when the husband comes forward and tells them that it was just fart spray. He was pulling a prank on one of his employees. The homeowner could not get that smell out of her condo, so she wound up suing this cleaning company for damages. They fined the cleaning business $5,000 and warned the husband if he did that again, he'd be banned from the property. When I tell you I can play the game, y'all, I can play the game 100 times better than you ever thought about playing it. Don't f with me. So they take us over to another building so we can get back to work. Go to the next room, and instead of finding food and wrappers, I'm now finding penny screws and rocks all over the floor in every room of these condos. So I know it's him, and the other coworkers already warned me. They said he would also stuff cotton balls and Q-tips up in the vacuum cleaner hose and in the bottom where you could see it. That way you'd have to stop and clean it out before you could vacuum. Not me. I was about to teach his ass a big lesson, so instead of cleaning the vacuum out or picking that stuff up, I cut the vacuum cleaner on and sucked it all up. It went, and it tore the motor up. It was smoking. That vacuum sounded like a tractor when I got done. So what do? I called his wife, and I said, look, there was something big in this vacuum when I cut it on. You need to come check it out. So she comes in and dumps out the vacuum, and when she sees all that stuff, she says, I don't know how that got there. Like, she's playing dumb. She knows damn well how it got there. I said, why are you playing dumb? Your husband's been doing this to me all day. He's done it to other employees. I said, you do realize by letting your husband do this, and I'm going to have to report that. She said, no, don't report it yet. Wait, let me talk to the homeowner first. And she calls the homeowner in. So the homeowner comes in, I play my role. Oh my God, I'm so sorry I broke your vacuum. I didn't know that stuff was in there. I'm so sorry. The homeowner walked over and said, it's not your fault. Whoever stuffed that in the vacuum cleaner, that's whose fault it is. I want to know who did that right now. The boss lady said, it was my husband. He was trying to make sure they were cleaning the room. The homeowner said, why was your husband stuffing things in my vacuum cleaner to test your employees? That's ridiculous. He just tore up $1,000 vacuum cleaner. The boss lady said, I know, I'm sorry. We'll pay for the damages and I'm going to make sure he don't do this again. The homeowner said, look, my issue is I don't feel safe as a woman living in this building with your husband creeping around. I've heard some stories about him and I don't like it. I don't want y'all here. The boss lady begged and pleaded, but the homeowner said she was going to report them to building management and to the realty company that hired them. And she wanted the money back for her vacuum, but the boss lady did give her that. So the boss lady calls her husband. They drive off in the same car and you can hear them fighting. The next day when I come to work, she picked me to go with her team. And the whole time we worked, when she was around, she was on the phone with her husband. I told you not to do this. No, you stay out of that room. Don't you go anywhere near that girl. To another employee. No, leave her alone. You get your ass to the warehouse. They lost a lot of work pretty quickly, and about a year or so later, they had to shut the business down, but she stayed with him for another 5 years up until he left her for a younger woman. She was his biggest enabler. She was just as bad as him. She didn't say nothing to him unless it messed with her money or her business. So what was the moral of this story? Don't f with me. That's the moral. Anyways, I love y'all, and I hope you have a great day. And remember, be nice to your employees. Bye.
What are things that happened to you as a kid but nobody believes you? This girl says that a doll talked to her. It was around Christmas time and her mom had just bought gifts for her cousins. She had given one of the toys to her little brother just to entertain him for the meantime, and then she ends up taking the toy away, telling him, hey, you're gonna kill the battery, so I'm gonna put it away now. She says that this doll turns and looks at her and says, yeah, my batteries are gonna die. bitch, what? You are about to die if you try to fucking tell me that shit. She obviously like screams. She's terrified. She runs to tell her mom, and of course her mom did not believe her. Ever since then, she hated dolls, especially the ones that could talk. Thankfully, that doll was for your cousin, so get out of this house, you know, wrap that shit up and hand it over. So this guy says that when he was around 5 or 6 years old, he was in his grandmother's room and they were playing with toys, and that's when out of nowhere this really bad thunderstorm hit. His grandmother left the room to close the windows, to close doors, and right when he was seeing that she was coming back to the room, the bedroom door where he was in, the grandmother shut and locked by itself. Because he was little, he was gonna start climbing down the bed, and when he did that, he says that underneath the bed, he saw a lot of little creatures. He described them as like the movie Gremlins, like a whole bunch of creatures underneath the bed. He noticed that these creatures were surrounding the bed and they were trying to get on the bed to get to him. In my head, I'm thinking duendes, but like the best explanation he had was the Gremlin movie. Ooh. Obviously, he was really scared, so he started to scream, he started to cry. Luckily, the grandmother had a key to that door, so when she unlocked it and went in there, he told her what he saw. They both looked under the bed and there was nothing there. He also never saw these creatures again, but has no explanation as to what or why this happened. So this guy says that when he was little, he had this habit of waking up in the middle of the night to play with his toys while his brothers were asleep. Now, every time he would get up to play with these toys, he would notice that there was a doll that would walk around the house just like on her own. He explains how he was so young that at the time he didn't understand that that could be scary. Like, he didn't understand fear yet. So because of that, he wouldn't give it that much importance. He would be playing with his toys and this doll would just be like walking around him. Bitch, what the fuck? Now, again, he would get up in the middle of the night, play around, the doll would be walking around, he didn't give a fuck, he didn't know fear, except for there was this one night where again, he woke up in the middle of the night, he thought to himself, oh, I'm gonna go play. As he sits up, the doll is at the foot of his bed, just staring at him. Now, he thinks that was the very first time that he understood fear because he didn't want to get up, he didn't want to go play, he just wanted to lay back down and go to sleep. Of course, when the morning time came, he did go and tell his mom what happened, what the doll was doing, and she did not believe him. He does say that as he got older, as he turned into a teen, he told his mom the same story again and she finally believed him. He does say that even after he saw that doll and hit the foot of his bed, the doll would continue to do this so many more times, and it was only that specific doll. No other toys would do that.
The story is called The Possession of Linda the Housemaid, and it was submitted by someone named Jeannie, who swears this really happened. And she says when their maid, Linda, began behaving strangely, she and her sister thought that she was having a medical emergency. But after taking her to the hospital, the doctors found nothing wrong, and so they took her to a sheik who told them that she was possessed. And when they searched her room the next morning, they uncovered evidence that led them to believe that something much darker was going on. If you're new here, this is Spooky Scary Storytime, the series of listener-submitted stories about the strangest or most unbelievable things that people have ever experienced. I'm not sure where this story takes place, but Jeannie says that it's still the strangest thing that's ever happened to her family, and years later, she still thinks about it. And she was 16 years old when this experience took place, and it all unfolded in less than 48 hours. Jeannie's mother was away on a work trip, and she and her twin sister, Briar, were left alone at the house. And at first, this was fun because they were two teenage girls who had the house to themselves, but after a few weeks, they missed their mom. And so one night, they decided they were going to sleep in their mother's room in order to feel closer to her. And they talked for a while. They stayed up pretty late, but eventually they fell asleep. But around 5 a.m., they were jolted awake by a pounding at the bedroom door. The pounding was desperate and frantic, and both girls immediately sat up. And Jeannie called out, "Who's there?" And on the other side, a shaky voice said, "It's me, Princess." Princess was one of the family's two full-time housemates. The girls opened the door, and as soon as they did, they knew something was wrong because Princess looked absolutely terrified. And they said, "What's going on?" And she said, "It's Linda. She's on the floor. She's shaking. I don't know what's wrong with her." Linda was the family's other full-time housemaid, and Princess looked like she was about to cry as she told them this. And so Jeannie and Briar assumed that Linda must be having some kind of medical emergency, and they began to move past Princess, but as they did, Princess grabbed Jeannie's arm. The moment Princess touched Jeannie, she felt this overwhelming sensation of like a wave of heat and goosebumps running through her body, which caused her to immediately pull away, and she looked at Briar. Something just felt off, and they followed Princess downstairs, and that's when they saw Linda crying on the living room floor. She was frozen in place and unable to move, and so Briar rushed over to her and put her hand on her forehead. But the second she did, she pulled back as well. And Jeannie's like, "What's wrong?" And she said, "She's burning hot." Briar described touching Linda like touching a boiling kettle, but Linda wasn't sweating. She was just laying on the floor, frozen, unable to move or talk. And so immediately the girls called an ambulance. When the paramedics finally arrived, Linda finally spoke, but all she kept saying was no police, over and over and over again. And the girls tried to explain to her that these weren't police, these were paramedics. She kept insisting that they were police, and so Jeannie and Briar both thought that she must be delirious from fever, and so they took her to the emergency room, and the girls went with, but when they brought her in, they found nothing wrong with her vitals. She didn't even have a fever. Her body temperature was completely normal, and so the doctors were like, okay, we're going to run some more tests, but after hours and hours of testing, they found nothing wrong with her. So they returned home with Linda, and they called their mom to tell her what was going on. And their mom just said, okay, just keep an eye on everybody. Make sure, she's acting normal, because they still thought that there was some undiagnosed medical issue going on. But they didn't realize how horrible things were about to get. Around noon that day, the girls were tired because they had been up since at least 5 when Linda had her medical episode. And Briar decided she wanted to take a nap. And Jeannie was like, it's cool, you nap, I'll keep an eye on everything and make sure Linda's okay. So she pulled out her phone and she decided to check the house's CCTV to make sure everything was as it should be. And she found Linda, who was moving around the kitchen as normal. And then Linda moved through the living room. But when she reached the stairs, something appeared to drag her up the stairs as if it was pulling her. Linda appeared to be fighting whatever it was. Her body jerked backwards, she spun in circles, and then moved forward as if she was being pulled by an invisible thread. He stared at the screen in disbelief. She had no explanation for what was going on, and so she woke Briar and showed her the footage. And the girls just stared at each other in disbelief because both of them knew at this point that something was terribly wrong. The girls called their mother again just to tell her what was going on, and their mother suggested that they take Linda to see a sheik just to rule things out. But getting Linda in the car was a struggle, and their chauffeur basically had to push her in the car. And when they arrived at the sheik's place, the driver had to pull her out and physically move her toward the door. Eventually, Linda did sit down in front of the sheik, who then looked at the girls and said, she's possessed. He gave the girls blessed water and olive oil and instructed them to have Linda drink the blessed water 4 times a day and apply the olive oil regularly. Didn't say much else. And on the way home, Linda refused to talk to the girls, and they assumed that she was mad at them for forcing her to go and see this sheik. And so Briar had the idea to stop at a local bakery to get some cupcakes because Linda loved cupcakes. Briar ran inside the bakery, got a box, and came back out, and when she offered Linda some, they expected her to be excited, but instead, she slowly turned her head from looking out the window, glared at them, shoved the box of cupcakes away, and then elbowed Briar as hard as she could. Neither of them knew what to say. This was not the Linda that they knew and loved. Later that day, they checked the house's CCTV again, and everything looked normal. Princess was washing dishes, Linda was doing laundry, but when they checked the holy water, they noticed that not a single drop was missing. They were like, cool, she's not going to drink it, we'll just keep an eye on her, maybe this episode has passed. But a little while later, they checked the CCTV again, and they only saw Princess on the camera. And so they didn't know where Linda had gone, and so they go downstairs to confront Princess, and they're like, do you know what's going on with her? How is she feeling? Where's she at? And at first, Princess just said, I don't know, she wouldn't listen. She was upset about the holy water. But then Princess became defensive and angry, and she was like, why does she have to drink it anyway? And they're like, where is she? And she just insisted that she didn't know. Jeannie and Briar began searching the house themselves for Linda because the cameras hadn't picked up on her leaving, so she must be in the house somewhere. And eventually they found her, collapsed again in the basement, shaking and crying on the floor. When they found her, she refused to speak to them, but eventually she did start speaking, but what she said made no sense. She was begging them to be sent back to her home country, which was strange because about a week prior, she had just told the family how much she loved being there and being with them and how she begged them not to send her back. She had just told them that she loved working for the family, and now she was begging to be sent back. It didn't make any sense. Girls wanted to take Linda back to the hospital or the doctor to rule out any ongoing medical issues, but she refused. And so then they said, okay, well, will you go back to see the sheik? And she refused that as well. When they tried to remove her from the house and put her in the car, she was physically grabbing onto tables, chairs, the door frame, dragging her nails across them, anything she could do to prevent herself from leaving the house. So desperate, they called the sheik and had him come to the house, and he just looked at her and said, she's still possessed. I don't know what caused it, but there's someone else in there, even though I can't determine what it is. And then he told them to send her home immediately. And not knowing what else to do, after hours of calls with their mother, the embassy, and Linda's husband, they had her on a flight going home that night. Before she left, they informed her husband of everything that was going on and suggested that she get more help once she got home, and then she was gone. Next morning, it was decided that Princess was going to go and stay at the girls' older sister's house just until their mom had gotten home and could rule out anything strange happening around the house. And after she left, Briar and Jeannie decided to search the maid's room, and that's when they found something that changed the entire story. The second they opened the door, they were hit with this foul, rotting smell, and Briar immediately started gagging. Linda's side of the room was an absolute disaster, while Princess's side was spotless. On Linda's side of the room, it looked like trash and things were left scattered all over, and so the girls began cleaning up. In the corner of Linda's side of the room, they found something wrapped in plastic. And so Jeannie says she started to unwrap it and realized that it was a pile of human waste punctured with needles. She stepped onto the rug and noticed that it was soaked, and as she stepped on it was also hit with this smell of what she described to be rotting pickled fruit, but they kept searching and cleaning. Under Linda's blanket was a towel that appeared to be soaked in a bodily fluid that comes out of a woman once a month, I'll say that much. Beneath Linda's pillow, they found a stick that was wrapped tightly with string and fabric and plastic, wrapped over and over and over again, so tight that they could barely unwrap it, and they had no idea what any of this was for. Also wrapped with this stick, they noticed were strands of dark curly hair, which appeared to be Linda's. And finally, beneath the bed, they found an enormous amount of salt, poured directly on the floor beneath the bed. And with the discovery of the salt came the realization that Princess had been asking for weeks for additional salt, even though the family rarely touched it and they didn't know why she needed so much salt. And then in the closet, they discovered one of Linda's uniforms that was ripped to pieces. The phone rang, and it was their older sister, and she informed them that Princess was suddenly feeling very ill and wished to return home to get some of her things. When she arrived home, she went immediately to her room and emerged only seconds later and looked completely terrified and bolted out onto the street. He said she was acting like someone was chasing her, and after she got out to the street, she stopped and hid behind a parked car, and that's when the girls called the police. After reviewing the evidence, I guess authorities ended up arresting Princess for practicing witchcraft. And that's why I said at the beginning of the story, I'm not sure where the story takes place, because I know in the US at least, that's not an arrestable offense. After being arrested, Princess apparently confessed that she had been jealous of Linda because Linda was younger, she was paid better, and the family generally liked her more. Apparently her resentment had grown enough to the point that she decided to do something about it. Jeannie says to this day she doesn't understand exactly what happened, whether you believe in possession, witchcraft, or something else entirely. All she knows is what she saw. And that what started as a loud bang at 5 a.m. became one of the most terrifying experiences of her life. She said sometimes the people living within the walls of your own home are capable of things that you would never expect and are hiding secrets that you can't even begin to imagine. Jeannie will be seeing the comments. Let her know your thoughts. And if you have a story you think no one would believe or one that still leaves you unsettled, please send it in. We would love to hear it.
Imagine finding out that the reason your father's business is so successful is because he sacrificed something pretty big. That big thing is you. I am back with another spooky story. We're gonna call the person who submitted the story Kinsey. Kinsey says, "Hey girl, I have a story that still freaks me out till this day. Growing up, her family was dirt poor. Her dad could barely keep a job and they were behind on rent constantly. Her father always dreamt of opening up an AI company. That's all the information that she's willing to give. However, because of bills and things, her father was forced to work all these different jobs and take care of the family. However, he never gave up on his AI business. They were so poor that there were times that their lights got shut off. And one day when Kinsey was around 12 years old, everything changed almost overnight. Suddenly, her father had money. A lot of money. He bought a new truck, paid off all their debt, moved into a house that was way bigger than anything that they could ever afford before. And whenever people would ask him, how did he get so successful? He would just smile and say that he's just lucky. Kenzie's grandmother hated it. Kenzie says she remembers the day that they moved in. Grandmother pulled the mom aside and started crying. She said to her, and Kenzie's overhearing this, grandmother said to the mom, "Nothing good comes that fast." Well, 3 months later, her eldest cousin died in a car accident. It was really tragic, but nobody connected it to anything. Then she remembers at this point, her dad's business got even bigger. He started traveling, meeting important people that you guys know, solidifying his AI business, and somehow making even more money. 6 months later, her uncle disappeared. Now, this one was strange. There was no body, no explanation, no nothing. Dude just vanished. And at this point, people are just calling it bad luck. At this point, years pass. And every time her father reaches a new level of success, something terrible happened to the family. One of her other cousins got diagnosed with a rare illness. Her aunt died suddenly in her sleep. Her grandmother fell down the stairs and unfortunately never recovered. And unfortunately, nobody in the family would notice a pattern until after he died. So while Kinsey's helping clean out his office, they found an old black notebook. Every single page in that notebook was dated. One side listed something good that happened, like business contract approved, new property acquired, investment doubled. And directly beneath each blessing was another entry. It was basically the date of death of each of those family members connected to that success. Now, Kinsey is just trying to understand what this means. Then she got to the final pages. Now, she said the handwriting looked a little shaky, like her dad had been terrified while writing it. Now, the last entry said, promotion confirmed. And underneath that was Kinsey's name. I know y'all hate part 2s, but I haven't done this in a while, so I feel like I'm allowed. So go ahead and leave a comment for part 2 if you want to hear the rest of this story. I'm gonna drop part 2 in literally a few hours, so relax.
I wanted to share my reincarnation story from when I used to work with children. I was a preschool teacher when I was in university and had been working with the same group of children for a while. My co-worker, let's call her Em, and I were doing a unit on families and family dynamics. So I just finished reading the children the families book before they sat down at the arts table to draw pictures of their families. I was sitting at the little table with them, drawing my little stick family along with the children, when creepy little Oliver came and sat with me.
Poor Oliver.
Now, the thing about Oliver is that he was always a peculiar child, off on his own, chatting away or pointing to random corners and giggling. Anyway, he looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Do you miss your mom?" Thought he meant because I was at work, so I said, "Sure, but she's at home now." He did a low little giggle and said, "No, she's not at home. She's dead."
What?
At this point, my co-worker Em nudged me to keep asking him questions. I said, "What do you mean, Oliver?" And he explained to me that my mother can't be at home because she died in the fire. The one that apparently also killed me when I was 2 years old.
What?
And was wearing that little white dress, the one that's a skirt now. He went on to add, "You died in the gasoline fire when you were 2 and you couldn't breathe. But now, you came back." I was so creeped out at this moment. But the part that really scared me was that, as a child, I was terrified of fire. I mean, so scared that I would apparently ask my mum all the time if she was sure the house wouldn't burn down and take us with it, and would wake up in the night to check that we were okay. The other part that scared me was that I had a long, flowy, favourite white skirt. I never wore it to work because white clothes and children don't mix, so how did he know about the white skirt? Needless to say, Em and I were forever more terrified by creepy little Oliver. Thank you for reading my reincarnation story, Hans. Much love. And keep up the stunning work, Dragana.
Snacks in hand, the vibe is set, and once I start, don't eat too much, because you gotta stay fine. But come on, bestie, it's... Yeah! Hi, bestie boo, I missed you. What you doing? You want to go get your snack? You want to get your gardening essentials? Yeah! First of all, thank you to all that tagged Kai Sinat under my Streamer University application. I love you guys so much. But could you imagine, like, yo, could you just imagine I break, yo. Anyway, new YouTube video is posted, a new compilation video is posted. So if you want to listen to my stories in long form, go over to my YouTube channel. Nobody else's, because they're making money off me. Anyway, on to the story. For the sake of this story, let's call this guy King. So this happened to King back in his home country. King was about 8 years old at the time, and King used to live with his mama, his daddy, and his grandma. His grandma being his mom's mom. So everything was, pretty good as far as like family dynamics. However, grandma had a specific room in the house that nobody was allowed to go in. Y'all heard these kind of stories before. Not his mom, not his dad, nobody but grandma can go in that room. And King always wondered, like, what is in that room? And she don't want nobody to go. Like, he cared about it, but he didn't really care about it too much because he was still a kid at the end of the day. It was just like certain moments where it would come up and he would wonder, like, but why? Anyway, his older brother at the time was set to get married to this very nice, pretty girl. But his grandma did not like that girl at all. And from his kid's perspective, it didn't seem like that girl did anything to them. From what he remembered, the parents was okay with the girl. Grandma didn't like the girl. And so he actively watched grandma spewing things into his parents' ears. And so then his parents started not liking the girl. So let's call the older brother Gary. So regardless of what they were saying, Gary said that's his woman and that's going to stay his woman. I don't care what y'all say. Period, Gary. So Gary proposes to the girl. It's like they had this nice private proposal. He didn't tell anybody that he was going to propose because he knew his parents, right? It was only after he done proposed and everything, she's wearing the ring, that he decided to say something. And so he says something to them, and he actively remembers like how the family blew up that day. It was like big ass yelling and screaming, and as a kid he never understood why are y'all screaming, because he want to get married. Gary's girl was on the side looking very much defeated, like she was on the brink of tears. Is it on the brink of tears or English is hard, okay? And nobody really cared that he was the kid, like, sitting there witnessing all this. It's not like anybody was telling him, oh, go to your room or nothing like that. They were doing it all in front of him. If anything, the girlfriend was trying to get King was trying to get King to go to his room or something. So of course, as a kid, he's in the middle of the tea, so he's watching the tea. Anyway, they're screaming and yelling. Gary is telling them off, like, don't talk about my wife like that. This is my wife now. Wife is saying, Gary, baby, please, let's just go home. Gary's like, no, I'm tired of them treating you like this. Grandma's like, this evil woman turned you against us. You don't care about us anymore. Screaming. In the midst of the chaos, nobody else noticed, but he noticed that Grandma actually slipped her hand in Gary's wife's purse and grabs one of her scrunchies. Well, I said a scrunchie, but it really was just a rubber band. Anyway, she was using that rubber band to tie up her hair, but nobody peeped that but him. And while they're arguing, Grandma has this thing in her hand, but nobody sees it, nobody knows. So when she's arguing, she just has her fist closed. And when everything settled down, they decided to leave and they went home. Grandma went straight to that room that nobody is allowed in. So he follows Grandma to that room, except by the time he got to Grandma, Grandma had already closed the door. And she was in there for the entirety of 6 hours. Didn't come out for food, to use the bathroom, nothing. 6 straight hours in that room of her chanting and moaning. So he's like, nah, something ain't right. And I love my brother. And I love his girl too. What is Grandma doing? Because at this point, he's smart enough to know that his parents and his grandma are entirely wrong about this couple, right? So he decided, I don't care what nobody say, I'm going to go in that room. I'm going to go. And so he waited till the next day when Grandma wasn't home to go in that room. He knew where Grandma kept the key. He just knew he wasn't, allowed in there. So boom, when Grandma leaves, he sneaks in that room. He opens the door and he says it is straight out of a scary movie. Like, he knew his family wasn't really religious, but it was just like he didn't know his family was into this kind of stuff. And at the time, he's assuming it's his whole family because Grandma's the one that raised everybody. So, and like, he's remembering certain like jokes as a kid he probably thought were jokes, but in this moment he's realizing, oh, y'all were dead ass. Anyway, he goes in there, he sees the rubber band that Grandma took out of that girl purse in a jar full of a whole lot of other shit in a picture of them two. I don't want to describe too much because y'all like to go try stuff. But the crazy thing is, finding this wasn't even the craziest part. He also found other jars, one of himself as a child, one of his mother, and one for every other sibling that they have, grandkids and kids included. So of course he freaks out, and the first thing he does is he calls his brother. He calls Gary. He's like in tears, terrified, and he's telling Gary all of this. He's like, I saw her take the scrunchie, she got that scrunchie in a jar, and explain to Gary. And at the time, he's a kid. Obviously what he's seeing, like, something is up, something is wrong, but he's not really knowing what's going on, And so Gary is absolutely like shocked. Not shocked that that's what's in the room. To a certain extent, Gary knew what, his grandma got into. He just never thought that she would go that far as to have each and every one of them in a jar. She has been controlling their entire freaking life. And up until he met that girl, let's call her Lucy. Up until Gary met Lucy, that's why they don't like her so much, because when Gary met Lucy, Lucy was a very nice, humble, Christian girl that brought him to church and all of that. And Gary started seeing life a little differently, And so that's when Grandma was, saying that she's making you hate us, and you know how that go. However, Gary was pretty mad at King for going in that room because they all knew nobody was supposed to go in that room. And he seemed kind of worried about it too. So he said, next day, I'm coming to get you. He said, don't tell grandma that you told me, but I am going to pick you up tomorrow. So then King is like, can I tell mom and dad? And Gary's like, how about this? You can tell mom and dad after I pick you up tomorrow. So he's like, okay, cool. So next day comes, literally early in the morning, he comes and he picks up his brother. And they immediately went to Lucy's church and they did like a 3-hour prayer on him, meaning King. But also like separately on Lucy and Gary. Jeez, I can't keep up. My bad, y'all. Nobody really questioned it because like, you know, that's his brother. They hang out all the time. Anyway, so he drops King back off, right? And when he was dropping King back off, something was weird because King is like, the way that Gary was acting, it was just like weird, like the kind of goodbye that, you know, Gary was giving, like giving him a hug and a kiss and everything like that. But he didn't really think too much of it. He just thought like, it's a lot going on right now. Except he didn't even know after that day, he wouldn't see his brother for like 10 years. Because what they didn't know was Gary was prepared for all of that. They were gonna move anyway. And the plan was to also tell them that night that they were planning on moving. But because of how they reacted just off them getting engaged, he was like, fuck no. So after that day, they literally went no contact. But the weirdest thing happened. Later that day, grandma comes up to him like, you were in my room. You were in the room I told you not to be in. And grandma gave him the worst freaking beating of his damn life. And then grandma told King's parents that he went in that room and then they beat him. And the whole situation as a 9-year-old really had a big effect on him, especially with like his brother and everything like that. But he understood. And if anything, after his brother went no contact, that was like his dream. He was like, the day I'm able to leave you guys, I'm also following after my brother's footsteps. I'm going no contact. I ain't talking to none of y'all. And after that day, grandma treated him so bad for going in that room. Because, like, I think grandma knew that he saw what he saw and told Gabe. And kind of like, you know, I keep calling him Gabe. Kind of blamed King for Gary going no contact. However, about 3 to 4 months after, grandma suddenly passed away. Like, out of nowhere, she went to sleep and just never woke up. As King is older now, he doesn't understand how nothing happened to him for going in that room because if you know, you know. However, his brother did take him and made sure he had him prayed on before he left. But yeah, that's the story, y'all. I gave y'all a full 10 minutes. So don't forget to let me know what you were eating in the comments. Don't forget to go over to my YouTube channel. Oh my God, I forgot to tell you the most important news. I'm having a sale on the ebook next week, Friday. I don't know what the date is, but I'll post it in the caption section, okay? All right, I love you. Bye.
After my mom bought a cheap dresser off Facebook Marketplace, we realized really quickly why the seller wanted it gone. If you're new here, I'm Krista, and on my account I tell spooky stories either submitted to me or found on the internet. Today's story was submitted by Ashley. My mom found a dresser on Facebook Marketplace for almost nothing. It was ugly, but she loved it. When we loaded it into the truck, the old man selling it just stood there, watching my sister Chloe and me with a strange expression. The dresser had a tall cracked mirror on the back with doors that could open and close. The second we brought it inside, our house instantly felt heavier. That first night after bringing the dresser home, around midnight, I woke up to the sound of drawers opening and closing in the hallway. I opened my bedroom door, expecting to see my mom. The hallway was completely dark and empty, but every drawer on the dresser was hanging wide open. Then, one of them slowly slid shut by itself. Suddenly, Chloe whispered my name from her room. She was terrified and said she woke up to someone standing in her doorway watching her sleep. She thought it was me until the figure smiled. After that, things kept happening. We heard knocking from inside the dresser at night, and the mirror doors would open even when we swore we closed them. Chloe refused to walk past it because once she saw a reflection moving when no one was there. For a while, my mom didn't believe us and would laugh when we told her about it. But then she eventually stopped laughing when she heard the knocking herself. One night, I got brave enough to check the dresser after hearing the noises again. I opened the bottom drawer and found a stack of old Polaroid pictures hidden underneath. Every photo showed the same bedroom with the tall figure standing in the background. It had thin arms and its head was tilted wrong. In the last picture, the figure was smiling directly at the camera. Right as I realized this, something whispered my name directly beside my ear. I spun around, but nobody was there. Then, the mirror doors opened on their own and the glass cracked straight down the middle with a loud snap. Chloe started screaming from the hallway. When my mom and I ran out, Chloe was pointing at the mirror, crying hysterically and screaming, "It's behind Mom! It's behind Mom!" My mom turned around, but nothing was in the room. However, looking in the mirror, there was a tall shadow standing directly behind her with a massive smile. My mom saw it too, grabbed the both of us, and we ran outside barefoot. The police searched the house and found nothing, but my mom made them take the dresser away the next morning. A few weeks later, the old seller messaged my mom. His message read, "It usually gets attached to the oldest first. I'm sorry." Nothing has happened since we got rid of it, but every now and again, when I walk past a mirror, I swear I can feel something watching and waiting. Do you guys know that meme of the fish from SpongeBob, like, going to Squidward's house, and it says, like, she didn't know they were just gonna play in her face or something? This is what I thought of. Like, the fact that he sold you guys a haunted dresser while knowing it was haunted, and then, like, had this expression on his face. You guys didn't know he was just gonna play in your face. Like, that's absolutely insane. And you guys are brave for not throwing out the dresser after you started hearing the drawers move on their own, but I do understand that your mom probably didn't believe you guys. Thank you so much, Ashley, for submitting this story. If you guys have any stories you'd like me to read, please email them to me and I will get to them if I can. I will see you in the next one.
A few years ago, my cousin and I rented out a cabin for the weekend, and it was in northern Montana. It wasn't exactly isolated, but the nearest neighbor was about a mile away. As we entered the Airbnb, it had the usual note hung up on the wall that they always leave, with the Wi-Fi password and things like that. At the very bottom of the instructions, it said, "Do not open the door if you hear knocking after midnight." And we kind of giggled a little bit. It gave me references to the Appalachian Mountains kind of deal. We thought maybe it was just to make the cabin memorable, whatever. I think I took it a little more serious than my friend did. Two things to note in the story. The owner had security cameras on the outside of the cabin, and they actually give you the password to log into the app so that you can watch it as you stay. And then the second thing is, yes, we're in Montana, but there aren't any trees exactly directly by the room. So at first when I heard the knocking, I thought maybe it was a branch until I remembered that. After a couple of minutes, it happened again on the bedroom window, and this time my friend sat up and she said, "Did you hear that?" And I said, "Yeah, I heard it the first time too." And then right after that, another time. So my friend pulled up the app to look at the security footage. As they were checking it out, the front camera was working, the back camera was working, the other side of the house camera was working, and the driveway camera was working. The one that was black was the one kind of on the outside of the bedroom window. Literally, the screen was just black. The knocking continued about 2 a.m. Obviously, we remembered the note that they said, so we didn't go outside to check anything out. And then the morning came, and that's when we went outside to go check it out. We didn't see any footprints, we didn't see any branches, there was no evidence that anybody or anything was out there. So we went back inside and we went to look at the security footage recordings. So yes, while we were looking back, the frame was black majority of the time. However, at 1:17 a.m., a glitch happened in the camera and we saw one frame. And the one frame, it didn't show anybody, but it showed a ladder, on the side of the house. We didn't own a ladder, we didn't put one up. The renters didn't have a ladder that was up. When we checked outside this morning, there was no ladder there. Tonight, we decided to do something else. We were going to just ignore all noises. We were going to pretend they weren't happening. Sure enough, 12:41 a.m. happened, and the first knock happened, and this time it was at the living room window. Thankfully, the blinds were closed, and it was crazy because the knocking, it was like they were going around the cabin. So it was at the living room window, then it was at the kitchen window, and eventually we heard a knock at the window right next to the front door. We muted the TV and we just sat there listening, and after a couple of minutes we heard one last knock, and it was above us on the roof. The following day I messaged the owner about it, and I messaged him about their little sentence on the note, and they said, "Did you look outside when you heard the knocks?" And I said, "No." And they said, "That's good." And then I asked for more of an explanation, and they said, the years past, guests have ignored the note that they left. Every single guest who ignored the note, they described the same thing. They described a ladder outside. And it was just high enough where somebody who was climbing it, their face would be level with the glass window. But the weirdest thing about that was not the person that could have been standing on it, but it was the fact that the ladder looked like it was up in mid-air. It was always a couple feet above the dirt, never standing on the ground. The owner said he never believed any of them until one night he heard it himself and he checked the footage and he saw the ladder moving, like the bottom of it moving past the second story window, and he didn't see anybody on it. But the top tier of the ladder was the thing that was tapping and knocking on the glass.
Of course, it's probably not surprising to say that not every ghost story here in Regina, Saskatchewan is true. And sometimes we come across these stories that either we debunk or our fellow paranormal enthusiasts and researchers debunk. And what happens when we come across these when we're doing ghost tours? Hey everyone, I'm KD Kalpa. I'm a horror author, paranormal researcher, and podcast host of Parago Paranormal, as well as local ghost guide here in Regina, Saskatchewan. And I thought I'd share with you one of the stories that have been debunked here in Regina. It wasn't by me personally, it was by another local paranormal enthusiast. And it has to do with the old college on College Avenue. So the old college campus. The building, of course, does have many ghost stories, and some people have thought that maybe one of them had to do with a soldier that supposedly had jumped off of the tower in order to lose his life. He apparently had decided, the story goes that he didn't want to live anymore after coming back from the war, and that is what he did. Now, there has been some research done into this, again, not by me, by the ghost guide that does the ghost tours of the college campus. So I greatly appreciate that he lets me talk about what he finds out. And one of the things he did debunk is that never actually happened. No one has ever jumped from the tower, and so it would be unusual for there to be a ghost because of it. And instead, he did actually find out that there was a few soldiers that were killed while the college was was being used by the Air Force for training military back in the 1940s. However, nobody jumped from the tower. So that story is a debunk. Sorry to those that really wanted to believe in it. But these are the kind of stories, and even, we talk about the ones that have been debunked while we're doing the walking tours and haunted bus tours here in Regina. So if you want to learn more about these stories and more about maybe even more of the debunked stories, then you definitely want to check out our upcoming walking tour that's happening over the summer. We're only doing 4 nights, and we talk about some of these stories while we're walking around Wascana. So head over to my website if you are interested in being part of that. It's kdkulpa.com. Otherwise, just follow along because I love sharing this kind of content here. And there'll be more to come. Thanks, everyone.
Let's read a scary Appalachia story. This one is called Never Go Camping with Skinwalkers. Welcome to the Creepy Cozy Cottage, where creepy and cozy meet. So grab a blanket and get cozy because we're about to read a creepy story. I was 16 when this all happened, but I remember that night like it was yesterday. I was going to go on a camping trip with my best friend out to Blind Frog Ranch for the weekend. We planned to go hunting that night, hoping to catch whatever we could find. We arrived around sundown to a large clearing next to the lake. It was still light outside, so at least we didn't have to set up camp in the dark. After we had set up camp, we went to go catch ourselves something to eat, not far from our campsite, but far enough that whatever was around couldn't see us from the campfire light. We were just about to head back after catching a few rabbits and a 10-point buck when we heard something far off in the distance that sounded like a cross between a human and some sort of animal that had been caught in a snare, which was impossible because neither of us had set up any traps. I looked over at my friend, wondering if he heard it too, or if I was just losing my sanity from being out too late and having barely any sleep the night prior. But the look on his face told me it wasn't my imagination. Even then, we brushed it off as an injured animal that was about to become lunch for another. As we got closer to the campsite, we heard the sound again, this time closer, and the smell of rotten flesh and sewage caught my attention, making me gag till my eyes watered while my friend became sick and emptied the contents of his stomach into the grass next to the thick-based oak tree. What really creeped me out, though, was the fact that if an animal had just died to another nearly 5 minutes ago, then why did it smell like it had been dead for weeks? And then I heard it, something, calling my name in an old broken monotone. almost robotic. At this point, I didn't think twice before dropping the haul and raising my gun at the sound. But when I did, I heard the tone change into something that was impossible. I heard my best friend calling my name from the woods when he was standing right next to me. So we just left the halls and ran back toward the campsite and put out the fire before diving into our shared tent with both our guns at the ready. Whatever was out there wasn't an animal or a human for that matter, but something far worse. Something that wasn't ever supposed to be seen with human eyes. I quickly grabbed my phone and dialed 911 while putting it on speaker. Even though we didn't have service, I brought one of those Wi-Fi hotspots you could get at the library in case there was an emergency and we needed to use our cells. As I was on the phone with the operator, I heard whatever it was say my name again, but this time it sounded like it was right next to the tent. And it even sounded like it was saying my name in my voice. And when it did, I realized I knew exactly what it was, but I was too afraid to say it out loud. As my attention got drawn back to the operator on the other line, I heard them say that they would get the park ranger out there as soon as they could, since we were only 100 yards out into the main road. But I kept my mouth shut, hoping that if we stayed quiet enough, it would wander back to wherever the hell it came from, until we heard it sniffing around our campsite, and that god-awful stench filtered through the night air. We sat there frozen in place as we watched the zipper to the tent flap slowly draw open, while whatever it was started groaning like me whenever I had the bad hangover from whenever I went out drinking with the guys. And then we saw it, an extremely pale figure with hollow eyes and a skull-like face blocking the door to the tent. Without thinking, I raised my pew-pew and fired, making it let out a terrifying screech as it galloped away just as we saw the light of the cops and the park rangers. And the park rangers' ATV coming towards our camp with spotlights shining on us as we heard the screech ring out again from deeper in the woods. Whatever that thing was, we didn't care. We were just lucky to get out of there alive. Till this day, we haven't been camping in those woods since because whatever it was still out there waiting for its next victim, and this time, they wouldn't be so lucky. Let me know what you thought of that story and feel free to DM me any of your scary stories.
There's a good reason why people close their curtains at night in the Appalachian Mountains. There are things in those woods that are terrifying. And one of those things happened to be the Appalachian Wendigo. Now, there was this man named Jim. Jim decided one day that he was going to sell everything he had and buy some acreage of land in the Appalachian Mountains and start this homestead. So Jim finds this good piece of land and he moves there, builds a cabin and several structures. And for a year, his life was amazing. He said one day, though, he gets a knock on his cabin door. And he said he opens the door. On the other side of the door was this older gentleman. And he said the gentleman starts speaking. He said, "Hey, my name is Fox. I live not too far from here. And I wanted to check on you because I know you're all alone out here. And things can happen to people who are alone in the woods." And Jim was kind of like, why is this guy saying all this and stuff? So he said the guy continued to talk to him, but all he could think about was the fact that this guy, Fox, looked exactly like his father who had passed away when he was a young boy. And he said it was just very, very eerie. It was like talking to his father. So he said, finally, the guy said, "You be safe out here. I'll see you later." And he said the way he said it was kind of creepy. So he said this guy, Fox, he just walked away and took off into the woods, and he never seen him again. A couple months after this, he said, one night he was asleep in his bedroom, and he awakes to this sound of scratching. And he said the scratching sounds were coming from his window. And he said when he looked over in the direction towards his window, he sees the shadow appear, and it's almost in the shape of a person. And he said the shadow just moved across the wall, all the way around him to the other side of his bed. And he said the next thing he knows, something was holding him down. He could not move, and he was panicking and freaking out. And then he said, all of a sudden, it was gone. And he got up and he said, that must have just been a really crazy dream. So he said, this kept happening to him. He kept having this, what he thought at the time was a dream. Well, one day he said he was out on his land setting up some traps. And he said he happened to notice in the snow there was all of this weird movement. And he said, "What is that in the snow?" So he goes a little closer, he grabs a tree branch, and he moves the snow over. And he said out popped several rats. And he said that's when he realized these rats were eating a deer carcass. And he said it was just so sickening that he had to start vomiting. And he said as he was bent over vomiting into the snow, he looks up, and there is the guy Fox. And he said the guy was just standing there staring at him. And he's like, hey, what are you doing out here on my property? And he said, Fox looked at him and said, you seen the deer? And he said, yeah. And he said, you see, a lot of weird things happen in these woods. And then he said he turned and just walked away. So he said, that was like a really weird encounter. Like, did he have something to do with that deer or whatever? So he said, next couple of days, he really, really kept having these nightmares where he would see the shadowy thing in his room. And then he said, this one particular night, he was sitting by the fireplace and he was just contemplating life. And he said, all of a sudden, the next thing he knows, he just stood up. He started walking towards the door. He opened the front door of the cabin and he starts walking out into the woods. And he said it was weird. It was like he knew what he was doing, but he couldn't control it. And something was just drawing him into the woods deeper and deeper. So he said finally he stops and he's just surrounded by trees. It's completely dark. And he said the next thing he knows, he hears his father's voice say, son, come here, it's your father. And he said out of the shadows steps that guy, Fox again. And he said, it's me, I'm your father. Come here, come give your father a hug. And Jim's just kind of like, no, you're not my father. My father's not here anymore. And he's like, no, I am your father. Like, I've been here the whole time. Come give me a hug. And he said he just like didn't trust this guy. He thought he was crazy. And he said all of a sudden, this guy's skin began to peel off. And he said that's when he could see this wasn't his father. This wasn't a man. This was this pale, white, skinny creature with sharp teeth, sharp claws, and these bright yellow eyes. And he said, this thing said to him, I said, come here now. And the voice had changed. So he said, next thing he knows, like he was able to get awareness again. And like he was aware of his situation where he was at. He turns and he just takes off running. He gets back to his cabin. He jumps in his truck and he leaves his cabin and just abandons it. And he said after a couple of weeks, he didn't know what to do. So he went to this Native American man in town that everyone said was a medicine man. And he told him like what had happened and stuff. And he said, this Native American man said to him, what you've seen was the Wendigo, what my people call the Wendigo. And he said, he has chosen you. And the reason he hasn't taken you yet is because he wants you to be as afraid as possible. Because to them, the more fear you have, the better you taste to them. And he will continue to follow you and harass you until he finally gets you afraid enough that he will take you. So Jim said he decided to sell the cabin and he never went back there again. And he said still to this day, he can hear scratching sometimes at his window and he will see the shadowy figure in his room at night. In the Appalachia, there is a particular set of rules that you must follow. You see, people lock their doors and windows at night. They close the curtains. They will not go outside because they know what's out there in the Appalachian Mountains. Now, this story comes out of the Roanoke Valley region of Virginia. There was this family from New York who had lived in the city most of their life. They wanted to get away and, live that remote urban life. So they find this beautiful home on 16 acres in this secluded area of the Roanoke Valley in the Appalachian Mountains. And their first day moving in, the father, he notices something weird. The neighbor actually comes not to greet them, not to welcome them to the area, but to warn them. And he says very specifically, at night, make sure you lock your doors and your windows and you close the curtains. And he said, it's very important. There is something out there. And he goes, you mean the people in this area are really like that you have to lock your doors? And he goes, I'm not talking about people. It's something else. But that's all I'm going to say. Now just remember, lock your doors and your windows at night. You'll be all right. So the neighbor leaves. Well, the father kind of just shakes it off and is like, okay, whatever. So they live there for several months, and they really enjoy their new life. Well, this one particular night, the family is sitting in the living room and they have a fire going. That's when the father notices that the son is standing next to the window and he's staring at something very intently. And so he asks the son, what are you staring at? What's out there? And he goes, Father, there's a boy out there. There's this young boy. Can I go and play with him? And the father's like, what are you talking about? There's no boy around here. We live in the woods. There's no one around here. And he's like, no, Father, there's a boy out there. There's a boy out there. And the father's like, you know what? It's time for bed. Go to bed. And he doesn't really think anything of it. over the next couple of weeks, right, the son keeps looking out the window at something and telling his father there's this boy outside. And he keeps drawing pictures of this boy, and he keeps saying, I really want to play with that boy. The father at the time just thinks, this is something to do with them moving and his active imagination. Until one night, the whole family is asleep. When the father wakes to a sound coming from the living room, he gets his wife up and he's like, I think someone's in the house. I think someone's broken in. Like, go and get the children, make sure they're safe. So he gets up, he goes down the hallway very slowly, and when he gets to the living room and he flips on the light, there's his son on the floor playing with his toys. And the front door is wide open. So he asks the son, like, what are you doing up? Why are you out of bed? And he goes, Father, I'm playing with the boy. And he goes, what boy? What are you talking about? He said, the boy, he came inside and he was playing with me. And his father's like, there is no boy here. Like, there's no one around here that is your age. So he tells his son to go to bed. He goes to the front door and he, peers out. There's no one out there. He closes the door. Well, up until this point, he had been keeping this door unlocked because he felt like, we live in the woods, nothing's going to happen. But that night, he starts locking the door. Well, the next couple of weeks, right, is when they started to hear this banging sound at the front door, like someone was there. And when the father would go and answer the door, there would be no one there. And eventually, the father gets so frustrated and angry with whoever's knocking at the door that one night he hears the knocking. He goes to the front door, he opens it, and, he goes out on the porch and he starts screaming, what are you doing at my house? Like, leave us alone, leave my family alone, like, quit. And all of a sudden, he hears his name being called. And it sounds like a child's voice. And it's telling him to come out into the woods. So this father, kind of makes his way back inside, closes the door, and locks it. And at this point, he's like, something is definitely going on. So the next day, he goes into town, and he goes to the local hardware store. And he talks with some of the locals. And he starts telling them, I think something's after my family. I think something is trying to, scare us. And the locals say, look, we're not trying to be rude, but you need to take your family and get out of here and move back to town if you know what's best for you. And the father takes this as, they're trying to scare me out of town because I'm from the city. So he goes back home and is like, they're not going to scare us. At this point, though, the family is so terrified that they are all sleeping in the same bedroom. And after a couple nights of them sleeping in the bedroom together, the father wakes up and he sees his son standing next to the window. And he's staring at something. And he's like, what are you looking at? Like, what is out there? What is out there? And he goes, they're here. They're here, Father. They're here. They're here. And he's like, who's here? And he's like, go back in the bed right now. He goes up to the window, and when he peers out, he sees all of these children standing around the house. And they have these bright, glowing white eyes. So he hurried up, he closes the curtains, and he gets in bed, and he holds his son, and he tells him to go to sleep. The next few days, he's very nervous. He's very on edge, but he doesn't know what to do. That night, he goes to bed with the family in the bedroom. He wakes up, and he discovers his family is all gone. He searches the entire home. They are nowhere. The only thing he finds is that the front door is open. So he figures they've taken his family out into the woods. So he runs as fast as he can out into the woods, and he starts screaming, where's my family? Give me back my family. And all of a sudden, he hears some movement coming through the woods. And out of the shadows steps this young boy. And as this boy takes a couple steps closer, he realizes it's his son. And he has these glowing white eyes. And he looks at his father and he says, not yet. And the father takes off running as fast as he can back to the house. He gets in his car, he drives into town and goes to the local pub. And he starts screaming to them, like, they've got my family, they've taken my family, like, you have to help me. And then he runs out of the bar and he leaves. And that was the last time that they ever seen this man or his family ever again. Are there dinosaurs in the Arizona mountains? Now, going back to the 40s, there have been reports of people encountering these strange dinosaur-like creatures. The most recent sighting comes from a man named Joseph who lived in Phoenix. Now, he said one weekend, him and his friends decided they were going to go camping. And they went to this spot out past the Superstition Mountains near the Tonto National Forest. He said they drove down this desert dirt road and they found this clearing. So they set up camp for the night. And as the sun went down, he said it was a nice clear night. You could see the moon and the stars and everything was going great. Well, later that night, they decide to turn in and they go into their tents. As they were falling asleep to the sounds of coyotes howling, they noticed that it went quiet. Something happened to the coyotes and scared them off. That's when they began to hear these strange screams that were sort of echoing through the canyon. And about 15 to 20 minutes later, they began to hear something moving through the desert and going through the brush. And that's when something crashed into their tent, knocking it over. And as they struggled to get out, they notice this mule deer that is injured and it's on the ground. And it's just moving around and thrashing everywhere like it's terrified. Right behind it, they see something come out of the desert that they described as a giant looking crocodile if it had two human legs and was walking upright. This thing lunged towards this deer. And as it was distracted, they took off running to their SUV. But soon this thing turned its attention on these three individuals, and it chases them to their vehicle. They get inside, and this thing is trying to get in. So they started honking the horn. They started screaming and making all kinds of ruckus. And eventually this thing got scared and it ran off back into the desert. Now, Joseph said that he grew up on the reservation and he remembered his grandfather speaking about these lizard people. And he said they were very connected to the reptiles, to the snakes, and to the lizards. And he wondered if that had something to do with what they seen that night.
I need to tell you guys this ghost story. This story was sent into my email, and if you have any ghost stories, paranormal encounters, or scary stories that you want to share, you can send them to the email in my bio. People always ask me if I believe in ghosts, and I always give them the same answer. I don't really have a choice. When I was growing up, my family lived in a house that every single one of us is convinced was haunted. There's really no doubting it when you're experiencing things in the middle of the day. The activity started when I was around 9 years old, shortly after my little sister was born. At first, it was easy to dismiss, find excuses for. Lights would flicker for no reason, even after an electrician checked every wire in the house and confirmed nothing was wrong. But the hallway light would still randomly switch on and off by itself. My little brother's toys would suddenly start talking or playing music while sitting untouched in the middle of his bedroom floor. The bathroom always had this energy about it. No matter what time of day it was, walking in there felt like someone else was already inside, watching you. Sure, it was unsettling, but it was manageable. Easy enough to explain away, but things started getting worse. After my mom got sober and our family became heavily involved in the church, it was almost like whatever was in that house became angry. Pastors came to bless the house, or we'd tape prayers around the rooms, and everything would be calm for a while. The silence would last for weeks, sometimes months if we were lucky, but slowly, the activity would start to trickle back. One night, my mom was cooking dinner, completely alone, when she heard someone whisper directly into her ear, "I'm back." She spun around, expecting to see one of us standing behind her, but nobody was there. Her experiences were always different from ours. She would wake in the middle of the night to see huge black masses standing at the foot of her bed. She heard whispers no one else could hear, and eventually she started believing she was hallucinating and having conversations with a man named Dave. For years, she blamed it on stress and alcohol. My little brother was only 2 or 3 years old at the time. He had a habit of constantly staring into empty corners of the house, asking, "Mommy, who's that?" Of course, there was never anyone there. His bedroom was also the one where the toys would constantly activate by themselves. All the meanwhile, my own experiences became even more strange as well. One night, I woke up for no reason and happened to glance toward the mirror hanging on my bedroom wall. Instead of seeing my reflection, I watched as a little boy I had never seen before ran across the room behind me. I spun around so fast I could have given myself whiplash, but there was nothing there. The room was empty. While I was trying to figure out what I'd just seen, my heavy stack of Harry Potter books suddenly flew off my desk and crashed onto the floor. I stared at them in disbelief. All stacked up together, those books would have taken a good amount of force to knock them over like that. Then a second later, my entire bed started shaking, violently, to the point that I remember clinging to the mattress so that I wouldn't fall off, completely frozen in terror. The nightmares started after that. One afternoon, I looked out my bedroom window and saw what looked like a glowing green cat standing outside, staring directly at me. I blinked, and it was gone. Even our dog seemed to know something wasn't right. We had a border collie named Floyd, who was the sweetest dog imaginable, but inside that house he constantly growled at empty walls and barked at ceilings where absolutely nothing was there. Sometimes he'd stand perfectly still, staring into a corner for several minutes before suddenly losing his mind, barking at something nobody else could see. Now, back to Dave. My mom continued having these strange conversations she thought were hallucinations with him. She described Dave as an older, tall man with an unsettling presence. No one else had ever seen him, until my little sister turned 2. One day, my mom noticed crayon drawings covering my sister's bedroom wall. She was understandably upset, and she asked her who had done it. Without hesitation, my sister pointed across the room and calmly said, "Dave did it." My mom froze. Then she asked what Dave looked like. My sister went on to describe the exact same tall, older man my mother had been seeing for years. Nobody had ever told her about him. Another day, my brother and sister were outside playing while my mom and I cleaned my sister's room. She had hundreds of stuffed animals, and we spent forever putting every single one neatly back onto the bed. Maybe 15 minutes later, my mom asked me to carry clean laundry into the room. I opened the door, and to my horror, every stuffed animal was back on the floor. Every single one, as if someone had swept them off the bed. Neither child had been back inside. My grandmother came to visit one afternoon. Now, she didn't believe in ghosts at all. She laughed every time we talked about the house. We were all sitting together in the living room in broad daylight when suddenly the piano behind us played one loud note, completely by itself. The lid was closed. No one was near it, no pets, no children, just one deafening note echoing through the house. She never laughed about the house after that. Even visitors experienced things. Friends heard coat hangers rattling inside closets. Guests heard dishes clattering in the empty kitchen. Some refused to come back because they constantly felt like someone was following them from room to room. Eventually, my mom reached her breaking point. Someone came to the house and spread salt throughout it, in another attempt to cleanse whatever was there. That very night, everything exploded. The dishes started rattling violently inside the cabinets. Floyd ran through the house barking and growling at invisible corners. The noise became so loud that my mom called the man who had blessed the house. He answered, and over the phone he could hear the dishes shaking. He immediately told her to get out. Now. My mother grabbed us, ran outside, and refused to spend another night there. We found an apartment and moved as quickly as possible, but even packing the house was terrifying. Constantly heard whispers in empty rooms, footsteps upstairs, voices that stopped the second we looked around. Once everything had been moved out, we decided to leave a video camera recording overnight just to see if anything would happen. The house was completely empty, except for an old piano and an antique record cabinet. The footage shows all of us leaving. You hear our voices outside. You see the headlights disappear down the driveway. Then the house is completely empty. Seconds later, water starts running somewhere inside. Voices begin whispering. Cabinet doors open and close. All inside what was supposed to be an empty house.
Let's read a couple true, scary stories. Welcome to the Creepy Cozy Cottage, where creepy and cozy meet. So grab a blanket and get cozy, because we're about to read a creepy story. My childhood home was beautiful. There were bay windows on both sides of the front door, plants everywhere. It was my favorite place to spend my days in the summer, but only the days. Ever since I was a small child, I've had this intense fear of windows at night. I was petrified of just the thought of walking past a curtainless window and seeing a person staring at me. It got so bad I started having reoccurring nightmares of a man outside my bedroom window, slowly getting closer and closer over the years. When I was in my early teens, one event solidified my fears. It was a very nice, cool summer night. It had just finished raining. My parents opened the living room windows to let the breeze blow in. We all got cozy as my dad put on a movie. I sat on a love seat directly under one of the windows alongside the house. The window sat across the side gate that leads to the street. A while into the movie, I began to get tired and was fighting off sleep. I closed my eyes and listened to the leaves rustling in the breeze, and I heard what sounded to me like footsteps hitting the wet pavement, rapidly approaching. After about 6 or 7 steps, they stopped completely. I opened my eyes and was trying to work up the courage to peek out the window. I wanted to know who would be running down the street at this time of night. I couldn't bring myself to look, but the footsteps had dissipated, and I deemed it safe to close my eyes again. A few moments later, I heard a man panting just above my right ear. I couldn't move. I hoped it was all in my imagination. The man then started to speak frantically, begging to be let in the house. I jumped up out of the seat and hid behind the wall so he couldn't see me. He continued to ask if he could come inside. My dad ran up to the window to get a better look at the man. Dad asked if he was injured and needed help. The man kept saying to let him in. My dad ran to the closet to grab a baseball bat. The man outside started running again, and I couldn't move, but I could hear his steps moving farther away. I turned to look out the front windows. The man had stopped running and was looking through them directly at me. He continued towards the front door. He never stopped looking at me. When he reached the door, he began pounding and trying to turn the handle, trying to get in. Screaming through the cracked window by the door, demanding to come inside. My dad asked again if he needed help, and he said he would call someone to get help. The man tried to open the door once more before running into the street and disappearing into the night. This day, I cannot look out windows at night, and I will not have any window open after sundown. The second story is titled Serial Killer Dream by Lucy. Before I had access to the internet in 2004, I had an incredibly vivid dream about a serial killer and his many victims. The details of the dream had faded over time, but one scene remained crystal clear. In the dream, I met a young woman dressed entirely in black. We were hiding together inside an abandoned house, trying to avoid the killer. I remember feeling terrified, knowing he was nearby. For a while, we managed to stay hidden, but eventually he found us. The last thing I remember before waking up was seeing the girl get caught. The killer unalived her, and the dream ended. When I woke up, the dream felt so real that I wrote down the serial killer's name before I could forget it. Years later, after I finally had access to the internet, I searched for that name out of curiosity, and to my shock, the serial killer actually existed. What disturbed me even more was that the girl I remembered from the dream appeared to match his last known victim. As a child, I had never been allowed to watch true crime shows, horror movies, or read about serial killers. I had no memory of ever hearing about him before the dream, which made the experience feel even stranger. To this day, I can't explain how I dreamed about a serial killer and a victim who seemed connected to him years before I learned who he was. I'm curious to know what you think about that story and what you think's going on there. And if you have any scary stories of your own, please just send me a DM.
A series of spooky stories except for the wildest way your body has rejected the person you're dating. Gained 80 pounds and not in a healthy relationship type of way. I was so depressed in a way that I didn't realize until we were done. I had shingles 10 times in 10 years. Hold on. 10 times? Shingles? Developed 2 autoimmune diseases and FND, ended my 36-year relationship, and my weekly angioedema flares have all but gone in 7 months. Angioedema? My God. I also thought that I was asexual, but I really, really am not. I was definitely not with the right person. The amount of asexual comments in this comment section is crazy. He had broken up with me and tried to get back with me, and I have anxiety tics with little attacks sometimes. I had a 20-minute severe tic attack at the thought of texting him. Started getting really bad anxiety attacks when just speaking to him. Also became depressed, and I would sleep for 16 hours a day. I got impetigo. I've always had issues, but never got impetigo. My health was awful when I was with him. Heart palpitations, lost 44 pounds in a year, insomnia, stopped wearing makeup, and stopped enjoying music. Ex from back in high school, but I constantly had issues with my tonsils. Like I had problems in the past with them, but this was an every week to every other week sort of thing. It was terrible. I started getting sleep paralysis nightly, and ever since we got divorced and living apart, I've never had a visit from my sleep paralysis demon, and it's been 8 years. Girl, he was the demon. When I was with my ex, I used to have dreams of demons, but when I left him, it stopped. Coincidence? I think the fuck not. Body pains all over and nausea. I shut down entirely and stopped doing everything and anything that I enjoyed. All I wanted to do was sleep. I always had health issues when I was with my ex. I would get colds, horrible periods, always exhausted, and bad dandruff. It took about a year for my body to recover after we divorced. I started my period during us time too many times. My body was like, stop it. This one is weird, but I kept falling every time we were out. I can be clumsy sometimes, but falling almost every time that we would go out for 8 months, and as soon as we broke up, I didn't randomly fall. It was literally throwing you off. Literally. Come back for part 3.
Might have known the story of real life boogeyman.
I am Native American and from a small town in Arizona called Guadalupe. I've encountered a lot of paranormal things throughout my life, but one encounter in particular really changed how I see the world. Ever since I was a little girl, I've known I was different from other kids. I would see things that weren't really there, or so I thought. I often saw shadows out of the corners of my eyes or even full-on ghostly apparitions. As I grew older, I started seeing things that I was told are called tree demons. I was always warned, just ignore them and they won't bother you. Anytime I visited my mom and went outside at night, I would see demons and other strange entities. Over time, I got used to it. On one occasion, I went to visit my tia and my primos. We were playing outside as the sun was going down when all of a sudden, we heard voices and whistles. As a Native American, one thing we never mess with is whistles at night. I remember walking outside when something told me to look around. That's when I saw a figure with a triangular shaped head and a very strange face. I had always been told to never let them know you see them because that could attract them to you. So I walked back inside and pretended nothing had happened. Experiences like that kept happening for a long time. I was under the impression that these entities showed themselves to me because of what happened when I was born. I had stopped breathing, and for a brief moment, it was as if I wasn't really here. By some miracle, the doctors managed to revive me and get me breathing again. Turns out, though, that there was much more to it than I thought. Later in life,
if you guys don't know the story or background on the island of dolls that's located in the south side of Mexico, I'm gonna give you guys a little bit of backstory on it and the urban legend. Even though it is a real place, there's a legend that goes along with it. So the legend starts off by saying the island's chilling history dates back to the mid-20th century, where a local man named Santana Barrera, I think that's how you say it, left his family to live as a recluse on the island. According to local legend, he discovered the body of a young girl who had drowned in the surrounding canals. Shortly after, he found a doll floating in the same spot. Believing the area was haunted by her spirit, Barrera hung the doll from a tree as a sign of respect and to appease the ghost. Over the next 50 years, he continued to disgorge for discarded dolls in the canals and trash, hanging them all over the island to protect himself from the paranormal. In 2001, Barrera tragically died of a heart attack, and he was found drowned in the same exact spot where the little girl had reportedly died years prior. Now, if you want to visit the island, I'm going to read to you what it says on Google. Today, the island is operated as a tourist destination by Barrera's family. However, it is an authentic destination that requires a significant journey and preparation. Getting there, it is located deep in the something canals. I can't even say that, but you will need to hire a private trajinera, a colorful flat-bottom boat. In order for you guys to get to this island, it takes 3 to 4 hours by boat. 3 to 4 hours. So just be prepared for what you're going to see, and just know that you have to really have a drive to want to do this. Also, it says on Google that you have to be careful when trying to come to this island, because the people that heard about this story and are located in the south side of Mexico, they have lots of other islands there that they use as a fake island for the doll island, and they're literally scamming people. So you have to really be careful and really know who it is you're talking to and know exactly where the destination is. If you guys want to know what the doll island looks like, you can look it up on TikTok. There's lots of TikToks that show there's dolls all over this place, like dolls hanging from trees, bushes, on the ground. Like, he literally dedicated this island to that young lady that passed away. Also, they have lots of videos on YouTube. That's how I first heard about it. If you guys have ever been there, make sure you comment on this video and let me know how your experience was, and make sure you guys follow me and like this video.
I'm gonna say this just once and I'm not gonna repeat it. This is just a video that I've been meaning to, literally put out there. Yes, I've been subjected to racism before. And I'm telling you guys, if you are racist right now, you're watching this video, you are, one, mentally ill. Second, you have a demon attached to you. You hear me? You hear me just fine. If you are racist right now and you're proud of it, you are mentally ill and you need to see somebody for that. That's number one. Second, you have a demon attached to you. So you have multiple problems. And let me explain. You cannot be born in this world full of, separation and division and so much evil in this world. And then you somehow is walking around with this, I don't know, pedestal that you think that you're better than somebody else because of the color of their skin. You gotta be mentally ill to be thinking like that. To actually belittle an entire group of people because you somehow, some way, either you don't like their culture, you don't like their language, you don't like the color of the skin, something that makes you think that you're better than them. That has to be the most, it's mental illness to me for you to be walking around and thinking like that. Let's get to the spiritual side of it. If that's how you think, if that's how your mind functions, that's how your heart feels, you have a very evil spirit controlling you to think that way. It's telling you to hate your brother and your sister, your neighbor, your classmate, your roommate, because, they were born in a different area of the world. They speak a different language. They look, differently. The color of the skin is darker than yours or lighter than yours. You're not spiritually grown yet. You have a deadly spirit that's actually attaching itself to you to fill like your heart with hate towards another group, and you have no idea that you only destructing yourself, not the other person that you actually hating on. You're doing it to yourself. You do not grow spiritually with hate in your heart. You do not grow spiritually until you are connected with everyone. I'm talking about whether it's me, as black as I am, whether it's my neighbor as white as he is, or the Hispanic neighbor right next door as yellow as they are. They don't have to speak the same language as you. They don't have to eat the same food as you. As long as you accept the fact that we are all one in flesh, that evil spirit that's actually surrounded you, that you have to hate another person so much because of their color of the skin is different than yours, it's still gonna stick around. Take a look at people who are actually openly racist. Their life it's just never good. They always so miserable. They always seeking for validation. They always attacking not just themselves but other people around them. Their energy is always so negative. And that has nothing to do with the physical self. It's inside of them. It's not pure. It is not free. It's being captured by an evil spirit that make them feel this way and act the way that they do. That's why most racial motivated crimes, it's always someone whose life has been hell from day one to the moment leading to the crime. And then everything around him has been evil since one. Literally. I hope you guys hear me correctly. If that's you, maybe you make that change today in understanding that you need to work on yourself. That is, if you are racist and you're proud of that right now, you need to seek help, one, because it is a mental illness. You need to find someone that can actually help you through it. Secondly, you need to attack yourself spiritually so you can eliminate and get rid of that spirit, that evil spirit that's putting that in your heart, making you hate others just because they're different than you are. But technically, common sense, there's only one race here on this planet. It's the human race. That's all we know as of right now, regardless of the other ones that are apparently UFOs, UAPs, that are about to make themselves known. Right now, the only ones that we have is each other. Only one race, the human race.